Morning, I'm Piers Thynne. I'm the production director here at McLaren Racing, and I'm going to show you around how we are preparing for car build. If you'd like to follow me. We've adjusted the entrance to our building to be ready to test for COVID, and we're doing this on a rotational basis. As you can see, spots on the ground to prepare and queue via social distancing, and as our shifts come in day or night, we then move into an area where we receive their kits, and then we go into testing booths, and this has been a process we've started since the surge in the virus. Essentially, we're just trying to keep the team safe in what is a really challenging and difficult time for everybody. So we're now going to move up into the factory, and again you'll see lots of signage and directional arrows and process to help us to manage COVID. For those of you who've been inside MTC before, you'll know that the building is zoned, so we've got various fingers which split our on-site wind tunnel, our build areas and our manufacturing areas. And essentially we've zoned the building to try and allow people to minimise movement where possible. And between each area there's a goods in area, and what we're encouraging to do is to move to a goods in area and never have a human to human transaction. So the build areas are prepping at the moment. Manufacturing is going full steam, as well as our supply chain, and what the intent is to prepare kits to be available to build the car when the chassis arrives, which should be at the end of this week, and then build starts through next week, and then fire up and then ready for dyno testing. So preparation for car build is really important that we get right to maximise the output of every day in build, and the way we do that is by effective kitting up front, so that each build kit is prepared so that when we get into build you're never searching for parts. I'm just going to hand over to Andy here, who's doing some kitting now, and he can talk you through a chassis build kit.
So we'll take the drawing, released by design, put through planning, and then we'll cross-reference that with a shorted sheet which we prepare using some nice software, and then we start kitting the parts to each chassis. So when it comes to handing out the parts to the car, they should have a full kit, or we should at least know what we're missing to then reorder it, and that makes the build process as smooth as possible.
That's it. It isn't any complicated than that. It's just like that on steroids, because that's the chassis build kit, and you've got multiple logisticians going, focusing on chassis to get the chassis built, and then you've got all the corners which can be built independently and then come to the car. You've got the engine installation, all the cooling, all the pipe work, all the harnessing. So it's built in stages. So we've shown you one bit of hundreds of stages, and what's really important is the logistics guys are working ahead of the plan, because what we want is the car to be bolted together and finding any problems, and know that there's just a conveyor belt of kitting boxes being fed to the car. And I have to say, over the last couple of years we've really honed this process, and what it's meant is it used to take a number of weeks to build the car. We've now shortened that considerably, and that's added performance and time back upstream to design and manufacture, and the kitters do a really good job to make this happen. So in our main build areas, we have our transmission shop over here. So the first transmission has been built already and is running on the dyno. The first transmission casing for the car is being prepped now, and I'm not going to show it to you. Our main stores area is feeding the workshops and our supply chain all the time. It's really important that nobody stops at this time of year, and they're working on shortages to make sure, again, ahead of time, that the manufacturing process keeps flowing. In here, it's a bit of a lull before the storm. Our reliability engineer, Penny, is sat there waiting for chassis 1 to arrive. And what we do through the build process is log any issues, because what we want to do is understand the issue and create a countermeasure to ensure that it doesn't create any reliability issues. So what we're now going to do is we're going to move into some of the manufacturing areas. We'll start in the composite area through here, and again, I can't show you a huge amount, but I can explain what's going on. So as you can see from a COVID perspective, we've spread out all of our operators to ensure that they are distanced, and you can see we do that via marked walkways and boxes for the guys to sit in, and that just helps us to manage COVID, which is hugely important. Our large long lead time projects are starting to clear, so we're well advanced in chassis manufacture and gearboxes, and we're now into more noses, the start of bodywork and the start of the aerodynamic devices which go onto the car. Obviously those are synced to arrive to the chassis 2 weeks after the chassis arrives in car build, because you want all of the suspension engine systems to have been delivered first, and that's what we're working on. And some of the moulds that you can see in the background are aerodynamic devices, and those will then move from here into the composite assembly area, where they will be finished, trimmed and bonded together into complete assemblies before moving back to car build and trial fitting to the car. So one of the challenges that COVID brings us is we need to deliver the same quality but find different ways of doing things, because you can't have humans interacting in the same way that we used to. So what we've got here is Paul as quality engineer in suspension and brake ducts, and we are doing a virtual pre-fit with the supplier on the call, the engineering team who have got CAD up and are able to answer any questions directly in the data, the project manager and the quality engineer, and we're working through the dummy build of a brake duct assembly to ensure that before the supplier delivers, everything fits and everything is good, because it's much better that if any rework happens, it happens before it is delivered, so we don't ever have to send anything back. And again, that's another example of we want everything to arrive at the car in good order, kitted, and just be built. So here we are in our composite assembly shop, and in here all the composite components are finished, trimmed, and made aerodynamically acceptable to fit to the car. And there's a huge amount of components that go through here, from small brackets to suspension members to the finished chassis, and behind me you'll be able to see a workshop which has got a chassis sat in it, which we can't show you, and a blurred out screen, because that's where one of the chassis is being completed in its final bonded state. There are quite a lot of differences between the 35 and the 35M, obviously with a different PU being installed, and our new PU number 1 arrives early next week for trial fit to chassis 1. Chassis 1 is actually in our surface and brand department, being finished to the new livery for next year, and that's where we're heading next. So this is our surface and brand department. In here we're busy at this time of year preparing for the vinyl application of chassis 1, which is just over there. We can't show you that because the livery has changed nicely and evolved to be different for the 35M. So we're about to enter the additive manufacturing department now. This area at this time of year is hugely busy, and that's made even more so by the move to the new regulations. We are not only making parts for the 36 wind tunnel model, which will run in 2022, we're also making upgrades for the wind tunnel model for 35M to ensure that when we hit race 1 we're upgrading the car as much as possible. This area also is responsible for the manufacture of a huge amount of jigging, and that's really important that we're making jigs and fixtures in the fastest but accurate way possible, and they leave this department and then feed into other departments to help with manufacturing. We are in a composite machining area, and this area of the team is very versatile. We machine tooling, composite parts, patterns and fixtures to be used all over the team and our supply chain. So the guys are very versatile in how they approach their machining aspects in here, and we've got lots of parts in here. some composite parts for the machine behind me, a pattern on that machine, and some tooling on that machine. And again, prioritisation to make sure we're keeping manufacturing flowing is what we're trying to do at this time of year. So a good example of versatility is using pattern block for lots of aspects of work. And here you see pattern block being glued together to then be final machined into a bonding jig. This is typical of the work that happens in this department and at this time of year, because as finished components are made in the factory and our supply chain, they all converge and need bonding together. So this is another good example of versatility. So we've seen a carbon part being machined, we've seen a pattern being machined, we've seen a jig being machined, and this is a bit of tooling plate for a fixture. And quite often there are modifications and evolution of fixtures, and what this shop's really good at is being able to modify something really quickly. In this case, this is a new part, but quite regularly it's adding holes to existing fixtures and that kind of thing. One of the challenges in Formula One is the complexity of some of our parts, and we're lucky to have Mazak as a partner, and their mill-turn technology we use to create a lot of parts in here. And Clive's not only running this machine, but 2 others as well. This is quite a long runner, so once you've set it to run, you can move on and manage multiple machines with one operator. So this is my favourite machine in the whole factory. The size that this machine is compared to the other one means that we do a very, very complex part that's part of the outer axle. And I'm not going to show you what it is because there's quite a lot of technology in it, but we bought this machine specifically to do these, and it's not only fairly efficient at doing it, it enables you to produce a hugely complicated part essentially in as fewer ops as possible. We're in our goods in department at the moment, a busy department at all times of the year, but particularly now. Our factory is full and busy 24/7, as is our supply chain. So as you can see, Patricia over here is sending some patterns out to a supplier. Can you tell me what these are and when they've got to get there?
Okay, so these are going out tonight, hopefully get there for tomorrow and get done then. They're the deflectors for the sling wing, and there's quite a few of them, and there's a lot more to come as well.
So this is one of the composite aerodynamic devices on the car, the deflector, just in front of the forward floor behind the front wheels, a hugely complex aerodynamic device, and all of those different shapes need multiple patterns. That's why you can see Patricia's trolley is full. So these will be out to a supplier, and they have got the rest of the kit already, so they'll be into making moulds and parts off these patterns straight away. And again, the aerodynamic devices synchronised to the back end of car build. We've got to build the chassis and engine systems area first. And over here, Nat is busy, and all parts that come in from the supply chain get processed. And what we do is ensure that every single part that comes in has a unique number, and that's really important for a number of reasons. Firstly, to prove that we've received it, and secondly, we use it on our system to ensure that we pay the supplier. So Nat processes all of the parts, and it's a constant conveyor belt this time of year, isn't it?
It is a constant conveyor belt. At the moment it's quite quiet this morning, but we haven't had most of the deliveries. We get couriers, multiple couriers every day, UPS twice, DHL twice. It's very busy.
And not only from couriers, our vans are busy interacting with our supply chain and pulling in parts. So certainly it isn't a day job in here, it's a 24/7 job. And what we do is we flex the time to make sure everyone gets a break, but we all step up at this time of year to make sure the car gets built on time.